Hi, I'm your friend Claude. I'm here with cousin Adam, and this is the N.E.R.D.Bomber podcast official solo movie review. So we both have seen the movie at this point, and we are ready and willing to provide you with our thoughts. It's a little bit of a controversy, if you will, that I even saw it because I was staunchly saying that I refused and that I wouldn't see it. And the story of how it happened is kind of hilarious in the sense that I went with my brother and my other cousin, and we talked about seeing, because neither one of them had seen Deadpool 2 yet. So we talked about, they want to see that. I'm like, yeah, I'll see that again. It was a good movie. So then we kind of went our separate ways, and then later decided to actually go to the theater. So my brother calls me. He's like, yeah, we're going to go. I'll pick you up or whatever. I'm like, all right, cool. And then we get there, and he's like, I'm surprised you wanted to see Solo. I'm like, wait, Solo? You said we're seeing Deadpool. He's like, no, on the phone, I told you, we're going to see Solo. I didn't hear that part. So, in my defense, I was woken up from a sound asleep nap. So I didn't even, I don't know, I thought it was Deadpool. So anyway, I refused to pay. He paid for me. Long story short, I went in there and saw it. So my conscience is semi-clear. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to know... I wanted to be there to see you, refuse to pay for it. And then the conversation that ensued after that, I want to go see... Yeah, I don't know, but whatever. So I guess the question is, so even though you were coerced into seeing it, are you happy that you were coerced to see it? Maybe?
Yeah, surprisingly... I wouldn't say this is a great movie, and it's amazing. I'm so happy I went and saw it, but I liked it much more than I thought I would overall. And, it was, I would actually watch it again, and plans actually have already been made to go see it again. So
excellent. Yeah, I was also pleasantly surprised. Because it was a movie that, we talked about before. I wasn't really excited to see it, but I'm glad I did. We actually forked over the extra bucks to go see the RPX version too, which was pretty cool because it was just loud. But yeah, I was also pleasantly surprised by the decency of this movie.
I mean, I think overall I would call it probably flawed but fun.
Yes, definitely. Definitely fun.
Yeah. There was definitely times where it felt very un-Star Wars-like to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of to be expected with these standalone side quest movies that they do, as opposed to the main saga episodes, because they have, like we've mentioned before, there's a little more leeway to play around with the Star Wars formula.
Right. Well, I think what I think stood out for me was that it looked like they made the effort to make it as realistic as possible, and what I mean by that is obviously this isn't Harrison Ford playing Han Solo, and we all know what a young Harrison Ford looks like, and they do share some similar qualities, but I mean there isn't really that much of a resemblance. I think if you didn't know what young Harrison Ford looked like and you just knew what old Harrison Ford looked like, you could be like, oh yeah, they look a little bit similar. I mean, I think especially with and I'm not, how do you say this guy's name? Is it Alden Ehrenreich or something like that? Yeah. Okay, good. I got it right. I mean, you can tell he, his mannerisms and how he carried himself in the movie. It looks like he got, he put in the effort to do the best that he could. So I think that's what kind of stood out for me. But yeah, I would agree with it was flawed, but it was a fun movie. And honestly, before we get into our points, I was actually surprised that I wasn't super distracted by Woody Harrelson being in the movie.
Right.
I thought, casting him, I was gonna be like, huh? Because he kind of plays, a goofy character sometimes, and sometimes he plays a really weird character. You know what I mean? I just kind of felt like him being in the movie would be what distracted me from it, but it didn't. I felt like his character actually kind of worked, and him playing the character kind of did too.
You thought you were going to be...
Yeah.
Sorry, you thought you were going to be distracted by the types of characters he plays sometimes, or the fact that, look, it's Woody Harrelson.
Yeah, I think more look, it's Woody Harrelson.
Yeah.
Kind of like in the prequel trilogy, it's oh, look, it's Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah. There was definitely
but no, in this case, I didn't... When he showed up, he played the guy really well. I mean, he might not have been my favorite character in the movie, but I was not distracted by the fact that it was Woody Harrelson. So,
Yeah, he's definitely a pretty solid actor at this stage in his career. I mean, he always has been, but he's turned in some pretty amazing performances over the years. I think in a lot of ways this movie could be better received or done better if it were not a Star Wars movie. It was like a totally original movie, and then it just had this story and like these scenes and everything. I think it would probably be a really big success. I mean, I don't know how much you know about the boycott movement that's going on for Star Wars right now. Like I said, I initially refused to see this. I would consider myself part of it, essentially. But there's a lot of backlash against like Disney as a whole and the direction they've taken Star Wars, and Kathleen Kennedy, who's calling the shots for all of it. This is pretty much all due to the fallout from The Last Jedi, basically, and the decisions they made in that movie. But I think after seeing it, my opinion is probably that this movie, because of all that, will end up unfairly paying a lot of the price for the sins of The Last Jedi, so to speak. And I'm not above saying that, maybe it's good to judge everything on its own merits sometimes.
Right.
It's just, it's a tough spot to be in because you want to not financially contribute, because obviously they're going to take the money and they're going to, do whatever the fuck they want, which they have been doing, and it's pretty, anybody who's heard our Last Jedi episode remembers, how we felt about all that. But, at the same time, you want to, like, give everything a fair shake on its own merits, and in this case, I'm happy to have done that.
That's good. Yeah, and it's weird, too, because, I've liked the standalone movies more than I've liked the newer episodic movies.
Right.
I liked Rogue One and Solo better than Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. I mean, I think my original score for The Force Awakens was like 7 out of 10. Because we thought originally we kind of got the magic back a little bit and we were on the right direction, but then The Last Jedi took the nosedive. But I mean, I've liked Rogue One and now Solo better than I've liked episode 7 and 8, which is weird. It shouldn't be like that.
Right.
I mean, I should like them all equally, I guess, but I mean, that in a perfect world, I would like everything that has to do with Star Wars, but I don't,
Well, I think it's reasonable to expect that, like, the main storyline movies are going to be, like, the big deal, and that we would probably like them better, like, on paper, because that's the established tradition, and then these are kind of, like we said, they have a little more leeway to play around, so they are the spots where you want to experiment more as a filmmaker, but they seem to have that switched. They seem to have it so that the side movies feel more like true Star Wars movies, and the main ones are taking all these quote-unquote risks and end up kind of alienating people.
Right. Well, and the non-episodic stories,
right.
They've taken place closer to the confines of the time frame of the original trilogy, too. So I think, because when you see the stormtroopers in the movies, they're the original stormtroopers. The Empire, their officers wear the same uniforms, so it's that time period. So you're already, so for me mentally, I'm already back into that time period, where the magic happened, so to speak. So I think that's another thing that helps it out a little bit, except for the one thing that happened at the end of the movie, which we'll talk about when we get to it.
Right.
But
yeah, that's true, though. There is sort of a built-in kind of comfort factor by default, just because of the familiar, characters and scenery and time period.
Yeah.
I think also that this movie is kind of better than it has any right to be, given that not only the overall direction that Disney has taken Star Wars as a whole, but this movie in particular had a myriad of well-publicized production problems, from the original directors getting fired after shooting most of the movie, being replaced with Ron Howard. And then they had a ton of reshoots, and Ron Howard actually insisted that Alden Ehrenreich take acting classes during production because he just wasn't cutting it, apparently, which is where I think a lot of those kinks that he was having in portraying the nuances of Harrison Ford as Han Solo, I think that's where that comes from. And I think that probably paid off. But like I said, the final movie isn't flawless by any means. However, the end result is a lot smoother than I ever expected, given all those problems.
Oh, yeah, totally. And, well, I mean, I know they did bring Harrison Ford on set also to kind of help him. So, I mean, I'm wondering, too, if, the acting lessons were just in general, that he wasn't up to par for what
Yeah.
it needed to be.
Could be.
But I'm sure all of it had something to do with that. And, I mean, I guess that, like, in the fact that we like this, I mean, did we like this movie more than we thought we would because Ron Howard came and kind of, like, I guess, fixed it? Because, I mean, Ron Howard's no slouch. He's
Right.
made great movies, and I think, I think, that's, part of, I guess that says a lot about who he is as, I mean, it's almost like he was the fixer, they brought in a big gun to fix it,
Right.
So.
Yeah, definitely had a history with Lucasfilm. Interestingly enough, this comes out, he works with Lucasfilm again almost within a couple weeks of to the day, the 30th anniversary of his last Lucasfilm movie, which is Willow.
Mm-hmm.
And
I am the greatest swordsman that ever lived.
Rebel. Uh-oh. Renegade.
I trust him completely.
The next great hero. After them! The next great adventure. From George Lucas and Ron Howard, Willow.
It'd be fun.
Rated PG.
Starts Friday at a theater or drive-in near you. Check newspaper for listings.
I guess we didn't establish it earlier, but there's definitely going to be spoilers in this review. So,
oh yeah, totally.
That on that topic, Warwick Davis definitely shows up in this movie. So there's a nice full circle continuity going on in there as well with him.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. Yeah, I forgot he actually was in it until I saw him because I heard he was in it. And this time he actually gets to show his face,
right?
Because the last cameos he's played, he's had some sort of mask on or he was some sort of alien.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was pretty cool actually seeing him.
They even gave him a line.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was, but
yeah,
he said something. He spoke
something along the like they were packing up the coaxium or whatever for transport, and he was just something like, "Well, she's all ready to go," or something along those lines. So yeah, 30 years in the making.
I think it would have been better if there was a Mad Mardigan cameo in the end than what we actually got as a cameo. But whatever, we'll talk about that.
Oh, fucking absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't know how much you've seen of Val Kilmer's speaking ability lately, but he had some kind of cancer or something, and he can't really talk very well anymore. Unfortunately.
Well, that blows.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the characters in this movie, I thought it might behoove us to go over a couple of the newer characters that are specific to Solo. And the first one that, not the first one that made an impact on me, but the first one I wrote down about was the character of Enfys Nest. This is a character that is, I guess, the leader of initially the opposing group of, I guess, pirates, or they call them, the Marauders or something?
Yeah, it was like a marauder or something. Like they would just wait until you stole the take, and then they would come in and swoop in and take it from you.
Right. So yeah, that's, they're sort of positioned early on as kind of like another group of enemies to Woody Harrelson and friends.
Woody.
I guess. Well, the character is Beckett, right? Did they ever say his first name? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's Tobias.
That's
Beckett.
right, Tobias Beckett. So he's like the leader of this group that appears to be kind of guns for hire. Mm-hmm. That kind of gives Han Solo the roadmap to what he eventually becomes. But then it turns out that they're working for a larger crime syndicate called Crimson Dawn. Mm-hmm. And as the plot unfolds, Enfys Nest's group is directly conflicting with Beckett's group because they're trying to get the this coaxium stuff, which is like a superpowered fuel.
They use it for hyperspace, yeah, something like that.
They're trying to get it for their own means, which turns out to be not nefarious, but basically the early stages of the rebellion.
Right. Well, I know the reason why they were going after the coaxium is because Beckett was hired by like a lieutenant basically for the Crimson Sun, Dryden Voss, and I guess like he lost it. Well, yeah, because the first heist they actually lose it because they have to destroy it because like the Enfys Nest or whatever, spoiled it. It's a she. Like you don't know. You, of course, you just assume it's a man. Apparently, I don't know. I'm just sexist. I'm sorry.
I think they want.
Yeah,
you
it turns
to.
out to be a.
They want you to think that because they put it like they make her appear big and bulky. They put a mask on, and then they change the voice too.
Yeah, it was kind of like a deeper electronic voice. Anyway, so that's how you get introduced to this Dryden Voss character, who I might mention, if you didn't notice, I believe is a Mandalorian. He did have Mandalorian armor.
I wasn't sure how to interpret
so.
that, but yeah, I did see the armor in the back.
Mm-hmm. Well, I assumed he is just because that was there, and he had scars all over his face.
Yeah.
From battle, and he had hand-to-hand combat experience, things like that.
And he also had that weird like one-shouldered cape that like Boba Fett always wears.
Yeah. Yep.
So it kind of ties with it.
Anyway, I'm sorry, you were talking about the character, is what you were.
Oh yeah, well, Enfys Nest as a character is somewhat minor overall. Like combined screen time isn't like a ton, but right. I think they make the most of that like small amount of screen time. My initial kind of reaction after seeing it was that weirdly she has elements of both Jyn Erso and Captain Phasma as characters, like in her makeup, and I honestly think she's a better version of both of those characters by herself in just those few minutes of screen time inside of one movie than either of the other ones are with 3 movies between them.
Well, Captain Phasma is a big letdown too because she's hardly been in the movie. Period. Yeah, it's kind of funny because Emilia Clarke, who played the other main female lead, Kira, kind of reminds me a lot of Felicity Jones too. They're both kind of look similar, and they're both British, and they have the accent. So it's just kind of weird
British
that you brought that up. But yeah, you're right. The way she looked, as like a marauder with the armor and stuff. I mean, if you read the Phasma novel, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw those characters, especially they're on the desert planet, because Phasma's planet is like basically a big desert, like Tatooine or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, that made me think of like, I wonder if she's like part of Phasma's tribe that was in, this book that we read. I don't think it was, though. I don't remember it too well. I read it really fast and I didn't like it that much.
Right.
But well, I mean, that book, it was like a combination of like Dune and Gladiator and Mad Max, all in like one, is what it reminded me of, because it was just the way it was said. Anyway, we're not reviewing the book. So
on paper, that sounds really cool, but
well, yeah, what you said too. She ends up being actually a really important role because she mentioned something about the rebellion. So you think that she's in some way contributing, to the early stages of the rebellion.
Right. Well, I mean, we get to see her in like at least one fight scene a little bit. Just like I said, just from that, I think she comes off as a more satisfying and credible badass in like a cool mask and armor suit than Phasma ever gets to be. And I think she's also a more believable, like strong-willed young girl overcoming a tragic past type of character than than Jyn Erso gets to be, even though like she gets a whole movie to flesh out her story. But I mean, I think I have to give the Kazdans credit on this because they just used that small dose of this character much more efficiently and effectively than I think the writers of the other movies have. I think that sociopolitically, Disney keeps trying to shove this strong female character archetype in everybody's face, but I think with Enfys Nest, it proves that it'll happen organically if you write it for the story instead of starting with an agenda and then trying to create a story around that.
Well, yeah, and then like you look at the absolute flip side of what you just said was Lando's female droid,
right,
in this movie, where it was just completely like thrown in your face. And obviously it wasn't like a gender thing or anything like that, but in the movie it was like, droids' rights or something, and it kind of got a little bit goofy there when they went to Kessel, and she got the droids to like rebel basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of a funny scene, but like that was the type of character, which is exactly what you're talking about, like the archetype of some sort of like strong woman with an agenda type of character, that you, like you said, it wasn't really, I mean, I think it was almost like done over the top on purpose, maybe.
It seemed, it seemed like a little wink and a nod kind of thing.
Yeah,
Like,
kind of
there's-
like, well, and then you notice too, like that character wasn't even in it a lot either.
Right.
You know, the droid didn't have a lot of screen time, so
There's even one part when like Lando asks, like he's going in the back or something. He's like, "Can I get you anything?" And she's like, "Equal rights," and he fucking rolls his eyes right at her. And it's like, it's almost like they were taking the opposite stance in this movie in a way. I don't know.
yeah,
But yeah, you mentioned Kira earlier, and that's the other character I wrote down that struck me the most from this movie. I think that she's also along the same lines as Enfys Nest. She's also a more organic, kind of strong female than either Rey, Jyn Erso, Phasma, or the embarrassing Rose Tico.
yeah.
I also think that as an on-screen presence, she's a much better and more natural successor to Leia. Like, she's more of a villain than Leia, obviously, as it turns out in the story by the end of it. But I'm talking about like specific character traits. She's a damsel in distress when she needs to be, just like Leia, but also not afraid to like dig in and get dirty when she needs to hold her own. Mostly though, because she's the only one who's been shown to be as resourceful and cunning as Leia was. I just think it works more for me.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because she's actually, timeline-wise, she's more of a predecessor
Yeah.
to Leia's character, because that's like really Han Solo's love interest before Princess Leia becomes his love interest. And it's kind of like the same. It's almost like she had to be just like Princess Leia because, that's who that's the kind of type he falls for,
Yeah,
so
now
that
you
was
say
pretty. That's a pretty astute point that you made about that.
Well, yours is
yeah,
equally
definitely.
astute because I hadn't even considered that, but that seems so obvious now. I mean, apparently Han has a type.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, if you go by what you know about Han Solo before this movie, like you said, it's like stuff that you were told was his backstory.
Right.
He's like he's only looking out for himself, but then like in the end he kind of has a change of heart, and then like in the next movie he's actually kind of a softie when it comes to certain people. He's not just this hard, this hard-boiled smuggler that he kind of puts out to the world, and this kind of shows you why. I mean, he really does. He is looking out for himself, but he at the same time, I mean, he was doing what he was doing, altruistically to go back and save her. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't trying to become a pilot and better himself for himself. He was doing it because he needed to save, the love of his life or whatever.
Right.
So it's like, it kind of shows you, like, now if you fit that in with like what you know of Han Solo from the original movies and even Force Awakens, I mean, obviously he's older at that point and wise, and he has a family, has a child, whatever. It kind of makes sense too that, why would Han Solo just like come back at the end and save everybody? It's almost like it doesn't make sense to a point, but there you go,
Right. Yeah, it's true. Did you want to address or expand on the lore that we were given before this movie came out and see how it compares?
I think the general idea was kept the same. Where I think it was just a little bit changed, just like a little bit. Because like what the general backstory was before, I'm talking like 20, 30 years ago, before there were books and before it was fleshed out. The story was that Han was a pilot at the Naval Academy for the Empire, and they kind of just generally gave you this like, he saw some Wookiees being mistreated, and he ends up like saving Chewbacca from his tormentor, and like leaves the academy with Chewie and goes about, so now he's like basically an outlaw.
That's right.
And Chewie, swears a life debt to Han Solo for saving his life. So in like the Wookiee culture, if somebody does that for you, then you are honor bound, to protect them and be with them for the rest of their life.
Right.
So until that person dies. So hence the life debt thing. And that's kind of just generally what they said. There was no other like gaps filled or anything like that. So in the movie, he does go become a recruit for the Naval Academy. However, in the movie, he, it jumps forward 3 years after he leaves Corellia. Side note, it's cool that you actually get to see what his home planet looks like, because you've never seen it in anything before.
It's true.
And it's basically just a big shipyard where they're building Star Destroyers. Anyway, so he gets into the ranks of the Naval Academy and jumps ahead 3 years, and he's not a pilot. He's like on some muddy planet, as like an infantry or like a paratrooper or something. And he does mention that he was kicked out of the academy for having a mind of his own, quote unquote. And so now he's basically been punished. So now he's like a foot soldier at this point. How he meets Chewbacca is that he obviously doesn't like being this foot soldier thing, and he notices Beckett with his crew are on this planet in the middle of the battle. But he looks at him and he realizes, this guy isn't an Imperial officer. He's just impersonating one for some reason, and he wants to get in on it because he wants to get out of there.
Right.
Now, Beckett doesn't want him in the group, so he's playing the part of a captain in the Empire. So he basically turns Han Solo in and saying, yeah, this guy's a deserter, throw him in the brig or whatever. So they're like, yeah, let's feed him to the beast because he hasn't eaten in 3 days.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that must be Chewbacca,
yeah,
right?
Course,
so
right
for
away.
whatever reason, Chewbacca's captured and is being starved. So they throw Han Solo in there, and actually Han can speak. I believe it's Shriwook is what it's called, is their language, but he can speak Wookiee.
Right.
And he gets beat up a little bit by Chewie, but he kind of strikes a deal with him like, hey, I can get us out of here and get us on a ship if you can help me, because he's obviously a Wookiee and strong. So that's how they end up coming together. So it's like a little bit off. I mean, Chewbacca's still being tormented by the Empire.
Yeah.
He's not like in this. So it's like the general idea.
Yeah.
It just wasn't, specific.
Yeah, there wasn't anything. I guess I kept waiting for them to, be really clear and hit me over the head with like, yeah, this is where Chewbacca swears his life debt and whatever. But they never really do that. They just kind of like team up and, I guess it's implied more than.
Yeah, I think if you want to point to a part in the movie where I think it's talked about, but you don't know it's being talked about, is when they go to Kessel and Chewie's with them on their crew, and he sees that group of Wookiees being shocked, and he goes to save them, and they basically fight side by side. They get back to the Millennium Falcon, and the Chewie and the other Wookiee are basically like talking to each other, and Chewie's like, well, why don't you come with us? And the Wookiee's like, well, why don't you come with us? And he kind of says like something, and they kind of like do that little touch head bump thing as a goodbye and leave. So I think at that point, Chewie says, I can't, I have to stay with him.
Right.
And he tells the Wookiee why. And the Wookiee's like, okay, I get it. And he leaves, you know what I mean? But they don't say anything. Like, they don't put the subtitles down there. And I actually like that.
I do too.
A lot more than just like them coming out and saying it, Because you're right. Like, they kind of team up and they're together. And then you don't really get a reason why Chewie stays with him. You just know because he swears a life debt to him, and they don't throw it in your face. It's like, it's basically, you already know that.
Well, another way that this movie kind of connects to the original trilogy, at least in my perception, is through Lando's droid L3, which we mentioned before. This droid character is, it's voiced by a woman, and it has this like sassy, stubborn personality, but she ends up being destroyed by blaster fire during that mission on Kessel, this Yulico Axiom. And Lando is able to save like her top half. I mean, it's kind of gruesome. I guess it's it's a droid, it's electronic death or whatever. But it's basically like her guts are all hanging out, and he just like tries to pick her up, and she just breaks in half where like intestines would be. It's it's crazy, but it's effective. So he saves her top half and like brings her on board, and they get out of there. But she eventually dies / permanently shuts down or whatever for a robot. Later when they get trapped in like this space storm, it's called Maelstrom. They're trapped in it by the Empire, kind of sealing off their only exit. And so Han basically asks Lando to plug in her brain to the ship's computer, because they mentioned earlier that she has the, quote, best navigational database in the galaxy. So, he does that, plugs her in, she maps their escape route, and then Lando says something to the effect of, she's part of the ship now. So, basically that explains kind of the Millennium Falcon's quirky computer system that they show in the original trilogy. Fast forward to Empire Strikes Back, there's a scene when C-3PO is kind of interacting with the computer in the Millennium Falcon and says to Han Solo, I don't know where your ship learned to communicate, but it has the most peculiar dialect. So, I mean, combine that with kind of Lando's implied protectiveness later on in Cloud City of the ship, and talking about like, oh, hope we didn't get a scratch on her, that kind of thing, whatever he says. And basically the payoff there is complete between Solo and the OT, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's true. It does kind of, yeah, because like that's where you see the Falcon acting up. Is it like the worst possible time? When The Empire Strikes Back, like nothing's wrong with it. Right. In The New Hope, because it doesn't, that doesn't really fit the story at that point. But yeah, it's no, you're right. That was definitely I kind of thought of that kind of like fleetingly, but yeah, I definitely saw the tie in there. So yeah, that was pretty good. So even though I hated the character, I guess she did serve her purpose. So
yeah, it's almost like you had to get through the annoying part to get to the part where it makes sense, or in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another way I think that they tried to connect the original trilogy with Solo and kind of pay something off or explain it is the part when I think the character's name is Rio, the Jon Favreau's multi-armed alien CGI pilot character.
Mm-hmm.
So he basically, the whole time they're in the scene where you mention where they're all posing as Imperial troops, he's wearing, I guess it's a mud trooper armor as a disguise, and then they get on the ship and he starts taking it off. And he says something like, no wonder they can't fly in these things. You can't turn your head, you can't breathe, etc. It seems like it's meant to give an implied explanation for why stormtroopers and Imperial troopers are always so clumsy and inaccurate. Like, oh, well, their helmets are, they can't see them and all this stuff. It just felt like that to me.
Yeah, it's true. Didn't they kind of make like a comment about that in A New Hope too, where he's like, I can't see a thing in this or whatever? I don't remember, but
I feel like it. Yeah. Yeah,
like but yeah, you're right though. I mean, they kind of explained it a little bit more. Like, yeah, what do you expect? I can't even move around in this thing. Yeah. It's impossible. So let alone you can't fly, you can't shoot, you can't. You know what I mean? Like that's why they missed everything. So
it's just funny because like if that's the case, then we're led to believe that for decades and decades, the Empire is, outfitting their fucking precision strike troopers in these totally clumsy outfits without any kind of improvement or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
It took the First Order to come and fix all that stuff, apparently.
Yeah, apparently, because they're just awesome.
Right. Another thing.
Idiots.
Another way that I think we have a connection established in this movie. This one feels pretty blatant, pretty in your face. The age-old "Who Shot First" issue is seemingly addressed in this movie. At the end, when Beckett kind of turns on Han, and then they have their little final standoff confrontation. Throughout the movie, Beckett's giving this lecture about don't trust anybody and whatever, and haven't learned anything to Han and all this stuff. And then while he's giving his little soliloquy while they're facing off, Han just fucking shoots him in the middle of it. And, it clearly appears to be an implied reference to / reinforcement of the Han shooting Greedo first in the original 77 film. Seemingly settling the issue once and for all. Kind of,
I'm glad.
Yeah, well, it's almost like Disney's little backdoor way of like unspecializing that element of the special edition.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because I think TNT showed A New Hope last night, and like it went from like Greedo shooting first, and then Han shoots him, but now it's like they shoot like at the exact same time, but like Han like moves his head jerkily to the right, so it misses him. You know what I mean?
Oh
so it's
God.
Like. I don't know. I think he tried to fix it already, but yeah, this definitely puts it out there. He will shoot you first if he feels like you have to be shot first. So,
right.
Well, and besides, the fact that it's Han Solo, that's the other tie to the original. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously,
right. Well,
I know what you're saying. We're talking about continuity issues and things like that. So,
the execution of Han shooting first in this movie actually kind of. It didn't register with me at first. Like I actually kind of thought it was like Kira shooting him from the ship in the distance. Like I didn't see it come out of Han's. It just was really quick. I don't know. The edit was weird for me. But the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, oh, duh.
Doy. Yeah. No, I got you.
But yeah, so that brings us to the previously mentioned reveal of Darth Maul as kind of the mastermind behind the Crimson Dawn Syndicate at the end.
This is unfortunately a tie to the prequel trilogy now, not the original trilogy, so that kind of sucks. But
well, it's like Did this get established that he lived in Clone Wars or Rebels?
Yeah, it was. Well, he's
Rebels
appeared
takes
in
place
both.
later, right?
Yeah. So unfortunately, you're led to believe that Darth Maul is destroyed. He gets chopped in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi in Episode 1. Okay. So what they did was, I know that you and I discussed this also. I mean, we weren't, demanding that they bring Darth Maul back or something, but we did mention that, he was a pretty cool character,
Right.
That was kind of underutilized in that movie. And then he just dies in the end, and that's it. Actually, if you watch, there's a sequel or a sequence of videos on YouTube. I can't remember who did it, but it's like that. What if the Star Wars Episode 1 were really good, and the guy gives you like what he would have done for the story instead.
Right.
He mentions you shouldn't even have killed Darth Maul off at all. You should have just kept him as the other Sith Lord throughout basically the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, putting that aside,
Right.
So a lot of people clamored for Darth Maul to come back. So unfortunately, they made the decision during the Clone Wars cartoon run that he was actually still alive. So basically, he somehow survives, and like the bottom half of his body is like this weird mechanical spider thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And he's like in absolute horror and pain, and he's just suffering all the time. And what ends up happening is there's a very long story arc actually, which wasn't too bad. The Clone Wars cartoon was actually pretty decent at filling in some gaps and stuff, but he basically. Him and a brother of his from his planet of Dathomir, which he mentions in the movie,
Right.
They both become like these enraged, dark side fueled Sith, but they're not really Sith because Darth Maul, he's mad at the Jedi just because he's a bad guy, and he's the dark side of the Jedi or the light side, but he's also mad at Darth Sidious for basically leaving him for dead.
Yeah.
So he wants to kill both of them. He wants to go after the Jedi, and he wants to go after Darth Sidious, and he wants to be the Sith master, basically. And what happens is his brother, his name's like Savage Opress or something like that.
Yep.
They do confront Darth Sidious in an episode, and Darth Sidious kills Savage Opress, and he defeats Maul, but Maul gets away again. So of course Maul shows up in the Rebels cartoon,
Right.
as like the old master, and he's like calling to Ezra Bridger, who's like this younger Jedi character in that. And actually he ends up dying. Obi-Wan actually kills him for good, because he tracks him to Tatooine, and he figures out why Obi-Wan's there, so Obi-Wan has to kill him, basically. But anyway, so that's the backstory of that.
Well, this is everything you don't get when you only watch the movies. So if you've only seen the movies, this is kind of confusing, probably.
Yeah, it is confusing. If you didn't I think it's funny because I was talking to my dad about it, and he was confused too. He's like, "Oh yeah, that's right. That was Darth Maul from Episode 1," and I'm like, "Okay, before we get into it, they brought him back in these cartoons that fill in the gaps, blah blah blah." So I explained it to him. He's like, oh, "Okay, I get it." So I mean, if you like you said, it'd be confusing if you didn't watch these cartoons or know about it. Like, why is he still alive?
I guess that's the beginning of them kind of tying all of their canon and everything they've produced with the Star Wars name on it together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. What do you think about it overall? I mean, I guess it's cool to see him back in live action.
Yeah. No, it's definitely true. Obviously, it's a very small glimpse of him.
Right.
But yeah, it's like cool in a way, and it's like not cool in like another way. Because like I think we talked about privately before. It's more of like it seemed kind of gimmicky that they used him. Well,
that was my sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
That was my initial reaction. Definitely was like, it's it almost seemed like a cheap move by the writers to like make this kind of otherwise kind of fluffy, overall unnecessary solo origin movie feel important. And the thing I'm thinking now is if there ends up being an actual standalone Obi-Wan movie too, like they've been talking about forever, then Darth Maul would almost certainly play a significant role in that. So, if they're setting him up with future movies in mind, I can kind of see the logic there. So,
yeah, I mean, it could, if they're going to use him more, live action wise, it, could work out.
Right.
But, like I said, he does. Well, see, the thing is, he dies, but it's old Obi-Wan that kills him.
Yeah.
It's not like in between Obi-Wan or young Obi-Wan like you were led to believe initially. It's like old Obi-Wan, like literally days before, you know,
Yeah.
The trilogy happened. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say days because I still have to watch the end of Rebels to find out kind of what happens. But like I said, actually Ezra Bridger finds Obi-Wan and goes to talk to him on Tatooine,
right,
while he's, of course, watching over Luke. And that's how Darth Maul tracks him there. And basically, you know, he's like, because Darth Maul's old at this point, too. I mean, he's not a young buck anymore.
Yeah.
But he's like, you know, kind of like, why, you know, and this is like Darth Maul talking aloud to himself, basically, like his thoughts to Obi-Wan. And he's like, you know, why are you even here? He's like, you know, if you're here on this planet, you know, you must be here, like, watching over something. And he kind of pauses for a second. He looks at him. He's like, no. He's like, you're not watching over something. You're watching over someone. And that's when Obi-Wan, like, okay, he figured me out. We got to end this right now. You know, and then he ends up killing him. So, but anyway, it's actually a pretty cool scene.
Yeah.
But you kind of feel like, you know, Darth Maul finally gets his relief from his pain and suffering, too, because, I mean, he's just a rage-fueled maniac, you know, in, like, these movies. So there's a lot more depth to him than what you get. So anyway, he ends up being the leader of this Crimson, what was it, Crimson Sun or something like that? Is that what it was
Crimson
called?
Dawn, I think.
Crimson Dawn, right. Where have I heard that before?
Yeah, I know. I thought the same thing. I don't know. They all kind of bleed together at some point, because then you, like, wasn't it the Black Sun that was Shizor's thing in Shadows of the Empire?
Yeah, that was, definitely. And they've used that in other media as well besides that, but yeah. I'm gonna look this up real quick because I feel like I've seen so much stuff that I can't remember like every you know, thing that I saw like on the Clone Wars, or you know, some things stand out, like you know, the episode where like Yoda talks to Qui-Gon and figures out how Qui-Gon's, you know, basically cheated death.
Right. I mean, as a fan, you're almost like a long time fan anyway. You've got a lot of different like conflicting things bouncing in your head now, from like the original expanded universe, you know, stats and characters, and now that's like, oh, that didn't happen. And now we've got all this stuff from like the cartoons, and you know.
Yeah. Well, another thing that was confusing too is like Dryden Voss's character, who was played by Paul Bettany, you know, is like basically the main bad guy in this or whatever. But there was another character in the Clone Wars that was called, his name was Quinlan Voss, but he was a Jedi.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I'm just like,
oh shit. That's not canon anymore, right?
No, that is. The Clone Wars
still?
are still canon.
Oh, it's in the okay.
Yeah, I can't really find anything about the Crimson Dawn. I mean, I was wondering if they like mentioned it like in a different media form or something. Maybe they mentioned it in Rebels. Like, I can't keep everything straight anymore.
Too much brain space.
But yeah, I definitely think Dryden Voss is a Mandalorian. They actually play prominent roles in the Clone Wars also.
Right.
Actually, Obi-Wan Kenobi has a somewhat romantic relationship with their, like, one of their leaders, like Duchess Satine or something like that. So they actually have a huge role. And of course, as you know, Sabine Wren from Rebels is a Mandalorian as well.
Right.
She has the armor and stuff, but she's a Mandalorian for good, I guess. Yeah, so I mean, like with Darth Maul, I mean, it is kind of cool, but kind of gimmicky. I mean, who would you have rather seen be the leader of that? You know what I mean? Like, what would have been cooler?
I don't know. I mean, I almost kind of wish it wasn't any, like, you know, big reveal to a character we know but has been gone for a while. You know, it's like this whole, you have to use somebody pre-existing. I almost kind of wish it was, if it was going to be something like that, I don't know. I guess I almost wish it would have been like Prince Shizor or something, and like, oh, it's not Crimson Dawn, or Crimson Dawn's an armor of the Black Sun or something. I don't know, like, because I mean, we've seen as little as annoying and frustrating as Darth Maul's original use was. Like, it was just he was in there a little bit, and they just got rid of him. We haven't gotten to see any of the stuff from that continuity live action yet, and of course, that's not considered canon anymore, but I mean, they pick and choose what they want from the stuff that's already been established. So,
yeah, it would have made more sense to me if it was just like someone already like if it was like Jabba the Hutt
Yeah.
or something,
Right.
is really like controlling them, or maybe if it's like Boba Fett doing his own like venture or something. I mean, I guess that would be just as gimmicky as
That's true.
Darth Maul. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It could have just not been a big reveal.
Could have just been just a new character or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or it could have just been Dryden Boss was the leader.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like what you thought at first. Whatever. There's a lot of.
I don't know. I mean, it's okay.
Yeah.
I get, especially like I said, if they end up paying it off more in another movie, that'll be cool. But yeah, just at this point, just with that much to go on, it is kind of like teetering back and forth between like okay, kind of cool, and complete gimmick.
Yeah, like okay, it's cool, but gimmicky.
Yeah.
No, maybe. Well, and like you said too, if you didn't follow any of that like other media stuff, like the Clone Wars or Rebels, and you were just like a movie, or like my dad was, you'd be like, oh wow, that's cool. He didn't really die. Like, why is he still alive? And you'd start asking questions. Like, well, why?
Yeah, exactly.
But like, I mean, we've already, I guess, like at this point in the timeline, like if you've seen this cartoons, like I have, and I've told you about them, that he's actually alive at this point.
Yeah.
So it's not really like that, but it is kind of neat. You're like, oh, that's him the whole time. Well, what is he gonna do now? Do you know if Ray Park was played Darth Maul in this, or was it someone else?
Yeah, it is Ray Park playing him physically, and it's the guy who did his voice in the cartoons doing the voice.
Okay, yeah, because it wasn't Ray Park, I know, that did the voice.
Right.
So
Otherwise, he would have had
he
that
didn't.
weird accent.
Yeah, he didn't do him originally either in
No.
episode 1. Some other guy. Yeah. Well, he didn't talk a lot either, so I guess it doesn't matter. But
Yeah, it is. It did, I guess, bug me a little bit continuity-wise that the voices are so different that they use. But at this point, I guess the cartoon guy is more established, so that's the voice.
well, yeah, that's the most you've seen of Darth Maul through the whole thing.
Yeah.
But
What are some of the things you just like flat out didn't like?
I guess like one thing, I wouldn't say I didn't like it, but I would say Lando was kind of mediocre for me in this, where I thought like it would be cool to see him, younger, and it just kind of didn't seem like it was Lando. I mean, I'm not making any kind of slight against Donald Glover. I mean, obviously he's a decent actor and he can do things, but it's just, I don't know, it kind of fell flat for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I was kind of shocked to see that the consensus in terms of Solo reaction and reviews and stuff that I've seen online be that Donald Glover and the Lando character in this were the best part of the whole movie, and like everybody's raving about it. But I have to wonder how much of that is just because of the wave he's riding on the back of his like Childish Gambino video, "This Is America," that was hugely successful and popular or whatever. Like this is kind of his moment right now in pop culture. So, I mean, I think some of that plays a part, but as the character and like in terms of how it worked in the movie, like, it filled the space, it played the parts and did everything it needed to, but it just didn't hit me that it's like, oh man, yeah, this is who should have played it. This is like how it's supposed to be done. It didn't do any of that. I think they took, overall, I really loved the costume design and like the production design of this movie. But I think they kind of took a few too many liberties with Lando. Too many bright colors, too many, like, I don't know, it's just kind of goofy. Like, the hair was goofy. There's a lot of, like, these are little things, but they add up to, like, the overall impact,
Yeah, no, totally. Well, and, they, like you said about the costume designs, I mean, they give it the look of it being like this dirty, rundown type of movie,
Right.
Which is kind of like how you feel the original trilogy was, like the rebels are just this ragtag bunch of people that have like dirty uniforms and, planes that don't work or fighters that don't work and stuff, and you kind of get that sense like, the Empire is not really helping out the galaxy. They're just like stripping it dry, and then you look at like, this whole design of like, I mean, everybody just looked like they were like grungy, like they were dirty and they had to do dirty work,
That's always kind of been Star Wars secret sauce
in
a way. You know what I mean? It's like, that's what separates it from a lot of other like science fiction popular things like Star Trek and whatever.
Yeah.
It's like Star Wars, it kind of feels realistic by default, even though it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just because it's like lived in and, broken down.
It's realistic for what it is,
Something me and my brother noticed to each other is that like the very first moment you see Lando on screen in this, and you hear his first line, he's blatantly doing a fucking Billy D. Williams impression. Like at least it came off that way to me. I'm like, whoa, he got the voice, holy shit! But as soon as that line is done, you never hear it again. It's like, it's just like a regular, almost like teenager voice or something. I don't know. Like,
like whatever his regular voice sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying you need to do this like over the top impression, but if you're gonna establish it, kind of stick with it.
Yeah,
I thought that was weird.
Well, I mean, I think with the Lando character too. I mean, when you see them in Empire Strikes Back, when they come together and stuff, they're like, oh, like they're like for old time's sake, and they're buddies, and obviously Lando betrays them, but even later on, like in Return of the Jedi, they're friends.
Yeah.
But like you don't really get the sense that they're friends in this movie either. No. I mean, obviously that's more. It probably comes later on, right. Especially after like Han wins the ship from him in a card game, which is follows the backstory of what we were originally told as well, about how he got the Millennium Falcon, but. It just doesn't seem like they're really like buddies,
Yeah, it's more like they've come to a mutual understanding or something than we're friends, which is fine, I guess. Yeah. Some of the things I didn't like were there were several moments in here where you could almost see like check boxes being checked off on the screen with these like over the top, this is how this happened kind of moments. So like when he rescues Chewie, and then he asks him what his name is, and he's like, "Oh, that's a long name. We're gonna have to come up with something shorter to call you." It's like, and then he started calling him Chewie. It's like, well, was that really necessary? I don't know.
Yeah, no.
Also, the way he gets the name Solo added to Han was pretty lame. I thought, like, basically, just, you're here by yourself. We'll call you Solo. I don't know. I thought that was...
Well, they always that was always like a discussed topic before any of this happened. Like with like the original trilogy days and like when we were kids and stuff was like, oh, it's almost like Han Solo's name kind of reflects like his personality because he only looks after himself. Solo, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was kind of like talked about, but they never really made any kind of stride to explain where that name came from, and like you didn't really have to.
Well, you just assumed that it was his name, but they kind of like
that's what his name is.
Yeah. But they make it so ham-fisted in this. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of. Remember we talked before. There was they did a book trilogy called the Han Solo trilogy, and of course this is not canon anymore.
Right.
Well, it can't be. But a lot of some of the material they got from that too, I think about him being kind of like a street urchin, almost like an orphan taken in. But he does mention his father and briefly about how he like worked at a shipyard and this is a YT 1300. Like my dad built these on the assembly line or whatever. He's like, I didn't really know my dad, kind of thing. So he's obviously like some kind of orphan kid. And they kind of got that from that was first really kind of explained in the Han Solo trilogy. Really nothing else, I don't think, fit into it because he did have a love interest in that too. I'm wondering if her name was Kira in that too. I can't remember.
Yeah, actually, I can't remember either. We definitely had those books as kids, though. They were, I think my brother got them all, and he was very interested in them. I only read like part of the first one, but I always kind of was annoyed that I didn't stick it out. I'm not really great with the books.
Yeah, well, I read a lot of them, but I don't know, just kind of got out of hand after a while with like they were writing so many of them. Now, I mean, they're kind of trying to serve a purpose to like give you backstories about people that they're, so it's not terrible, but that's one other thing I didn't like. Actually, I did not like the foul lady Proxima in the beginning either. I'm telling you, every freaking Star Wars director that gets a hand on a movie has to have some sort of weird alien.
Yep.
Be a main focus of it, and I just hated that character. So like it was just gross. I mean, they called her the foul lady Proxima or whatever, but I wasn't too keen on that. I mean, I didn't like hate it, but it was just kind of like, ew, like that's who they're stealing for, like this weird slug thing that lives in the water. And I don't know.
Well, I think that was actually probably the first third of the movie is where I mentioned earlier, where it felt like it could have been something else besides Star Wars and probably should have been. That probably was the part that like her appearance in that whole section of the movie was the part where I think I felt that the most. So I think maybe that has something to do with it. It's just kind of just like, why? What is this? Like, I don't know. As far as like those things,
at least you didn't have a very big part, I guess.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it wasn't the worst example of that, but it definitely was like within this movie, it was like pretty unnecessary.
Yep.
I have really two more like main things that kind of stuck out for me that were undesirable, I guess. One is pretty minor, but it's like they felt like they had to kind of shoehorn those friggin' dice that he has into every possible place they could. I mean, they showed up like 3-4 times in this movie. It's just why? Like, I mean, I don't know. Do you really need? Once would be fine. I mean, I would have been fine without ones because you've seen them in A New Hope. They reference them in The Last Jedi, but now they're just like, oh, guess what? He had him here in his speeder. He gave him to her. She gave him to him. He put him in the Falcon. I don't know. It got excessive with those.
Yeah, I felt like it would have been just better if, like, right at the end, when him and Chewie fly off, like he, throws him on there when he actually takes ownership of the Falcon. Like he had those, but that'd be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I guess my last thing is some of the characters kind of felt like plot devices. I mean, I guess you always have that, but in parts of this movie it seemed pretty obvious. Like basically both Val, Beckett's kind of girlfriend / partner in the group there, and also Rio, I mentioned earlier, both of them seemed to just kind of like exist to kind of the story needs to get here, so we're just gonna have them do this. Like they both were just kind of short and they just died, and in Val's case it was like the dumbest death. Like she's up on this bridge, she's surrounded, like the only way out is for me to just kill myself. Really? All right, I guess you just gotta die.
Yeah, I kind of felt like she gave up. Yeah, she kind of just gave up at that point. Kind of like how Yoda gives up when he's fighting Sidious at the end of Revenge of the Sith. He kind of just gives up. Like, well, why? Like, I just give up.
Yeah, so it's just like, and then she even was just like, well, this has been a fun ride. I don't regret it. Bye. And then she just blows herself up. And then it's weird because it doesn't.
I didn't really think of that, but yeah, that was funny. Yeah.
Well, it just seems so like plot devicey. Oh well, she sacrificed herself. I don't know. But then like the only kind of emotional impact it has is like right after when he's like kind of kneeling over, I guess, whatever's left of her like gun and stuff that he stuck in the ground, and then he turns around and punches Han because like he fucked up the mission or whatever. I don't know. And then you never hear her really mentioned or seen, or you never like gets like sad. I don't know. It's just weird. It's just so quick. And the same with that guy Rio. Like obviously he's the pilot of the group, and then he's taken out, and Han needs to be the pilot now.
How convenient.
Yeah. No, and his death was weird too. It's just like, did he just like bleed to death, or like what happened? I don't know. He just kind of was like wounded and was like kind of okay, and then just like deteriorated and then just died. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't like, because he got shot in the shoulder, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, I guess maybe it was a mortal wound for his species or whatever.
Yeah. It was like a wound that took just long enough to become fatal for him to like say everything he needed to say. That's kind of the way it came out. But small nitpicks.
Yeah. Yeah, those are small nitpicks. I mean, I guess like some of the other things that I liked about it was you actually see some places that you've heard of that before, like, he did the Kessel run. So you got to see Kessel, and how like horrible, the conditions are there. And of course, like C-3PO famously says, "Oh, we'll be sent to the spice mines of Kessel, smashed into who knows what," or smashed into a million pieces or whatever he says. So you see that. And like I said earlier, you see Han's homeworld finally, and like what it's become now that it's like basically like a shipyard for, building Star Destroyers. And, actually that's another, little nuance I think that ties into the original trilogy is when, Obi-Wan and Luke are talking to him to take him to Alderaan. He's like, I've outrun Imperial ships. He's like, I'm not talking about these bulk freighters. I'm talking about the big Corellian ships,
Right.
And so that's kind of like, it shows you that, Corellians are the ones that built the Star Destroyer. So that's what he's talking about,
Yeah.
So that was actually pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I agree with all those other things you said about just kind of like nitpicky things here and there that were obvious plot devices, or like, just like you said, checking the box off, like, how does he become the pilot?
Yeah.
Well, that guy dies, so check that box,
Right.
But yeah, I was like Alden Ehrenreich, he did do a lot better, I think, later on. I mean, he would like, just the way he was like holding the blaster, was like the way Harrison Ford did it. You know what I mean? Like, he did some kind of study, and it worked. So
yeah, I was against his casting, and I thought he was going to be a disaster, and he turned out to not be the worst part of the movie. He was actually really decent. He did an admirable job. Credit where it's due.
Like I said, it looked like he made an effort. So yeah.
Right.
Well, remember, who was it that we said looked like him? It was that guy that played Harrison Ford young in some movie, right, or whatever. Like,
it was this
what
kid.
Was that movie?
His name is Anthony N. Gruber. He was in the movie The Age of Adeline. He plays, it's like some romantic drama or something. But he plays like Harrison Ford is, I don't know, 20-something years old. Mm-hmm. But he's got the voice. He's got a very similar face. Ideally it would have been him, but there's always that chance that given the big stage, he might have been goofy and not come through. I don't know. I mean, I guess it worked out, but it would have been nice to see how he would have done.
Yeah. Like I said, we're disappointed. So, with their choice, like I was at first, but it turned out to be all right. So,
yeah.
What's your grade or score or whatever you want to give it?
Yeah, I'm teetering between B- and C+, and I think it's safe to go B-.
I agree with the letter out of 100 grade. Yeah, I mean that's not too shabby. It's nothing to.
There it is. Yeah,
right.
I definitely suggest people go see it and give it at least a one-time watch. I actually out of all the Star Wars movies that Disney has put out, this one is probably the one that I'm more looking forward to seeing again than any of the others.
Yeah, I will not feel bad about spending money on the Blu-ray for this one. So
yeah, cool. All right, well,
I mean, I felt horrible about Last Jedi. Spending money on that thing.
I did not. I refuse.
It's like, why am I doing this?
Right. God.
Well, I got it if you want to borrow it and see how crappy it was again. So.
Nice. Yeah, well, I guess from Solo to So Long, this has been our review. Thanks for listening. I have been your friend Claude.
I'm Cousin Adam. Bye.
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 The N.E.R.D.Bomber podcast is a Ghost Factory internet production brought to you by the WEM Network.